Let's take a look at the different effects that the media can have on us as individuals. And before we dive into the different media effects, we have to understand what media effects are in general. Media effects can be defined as intended or unintended consequences of what the mass media does. And the degree and type of effect varies depending on the theory that you're operating under. But in general, we tend to underestimate the effect that the media has on us. And this actually brings us to our first media effect that we're going to talk about, which is the third-party effect. The third-party effect happens when we think that messages affect others more than they affect us. So we think ourselves to be smart enough to not fall for the messages that others would fall for. However, we are just as susceptible to mass media messages as others, and we are not special in that way. We might fall for a message that somebody else wouldn't fall for, and so on. And so, we are just as impacted by the media as anybody else. The reciprocal effect points to the interactive relationship that exists between the media and a subject being covered. So when a person or an event gets media attention, it influences the way that the person acts or the way that the event functions. And we've seen this with grassroots movements here in the United States. Media attention can cause a movement to spread that may have otherwise remained very localized. Specifically, we saw this with the Occupy Wall Street movement. And initially, that movement was a grassroots movement in New York City that was literally on Wall Street. But the mass media covered the movement and it eventually spread all over the country. And it was particularly a big movement here in Oakland in the Bay Area. And it would probably never have gotten here if the media wasn't showing these images of people sitting on Wall Street chanting, "We are the 99%, and really making their message heard using the media. So it had that reciprocal effect of feeding into the movement and causing it to spread. The boomerang, on the other hand, is a media-induced change that is counter to the change that was desired by the sender of the message. So the boomerang effect often comes from gaffes or blunders or plain old-fashioned poor decisions, and they become much more difficult to control and contain when the mass media gets involved. Before a group or person can clarify or provide context for what they've said, the story can go completely viral and be very difficult to control. It can be nearly impossible to backtrack because all the media wants to talk about was that mistake rather than talking about the context surrounding that mistake or the apology that happened after the mistake. And so you might have been trying to make a really important point, but because that mistake had happened, the media just completely takes off with it, and your message ends up having the complete opposite impact that you wanted it to have. So these are just some of the effects that the media can have on us. There are many others that we unfortunately don't have the opportunity to cover in this class, but it's important to understand the effects that the media can have on us so that we can analyze it and become more aware of those impacts on our lives.